Have you ever wondered what you'd do if life stripped you of everything, your land, your family, even your sense of worth, and then offered you one last chance? That was the reality for Elias Carter, a farmer who lost his home to debt and watched his wife and children leave for survival. When he stumbled upon an abandoned ranch on the edge of the desert, it seemed like fate had tossed him a lifeline. Free land, they said. But was it really a blessing or a curse waiting to swallow him whole? Because hidden beneath the cracked soil was a well everyone swore was dry. Yet, when Elias lowered his rope, he didn't just find water. He found something no man should have discovered: strange gold coins, secrets carved into stone, and a mystery tied to men who had vanished without a trace. If it were you standing there, alone under the desert stars, would you pull the bucket up again or walk away before it was too late? Stay with us, because what Elias uncovered in that lonely place would change not only his life, but an entire territory. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the stories that stir your heart and haunt your memory. The well was supposed to be bone dry. That's what the deed had guaranteed, and that's what every neighbor in Silver Vista swore up and down. But when Elias Carter dropped his rope into the black shaft at Dry Creek Ranch, the sound that floated back up wasn't the dull thud of stone on stone. It was a scrape metal against rock far too deep below to make sense. Elias leaned over the rim, sweat trickling down his weathered face, staring into the circle of stones that swallowed the afternoon light. Just 3 days earlier, he had signed the papers for this forgotten spread. They called it free land, though everyone knew it came with strings. Nobody else wanted it, not after what had happened there 20 years back. He hauled the rope hand over hand, his calluses gripping steady. When the bucket emerged, it carried more weight than a dry well had any right to. He set it down on the cracked dirt and stared. Water. Clear, cold water that shimmered like glass in the sun. Yet something gleamed beneath its surface, something small, metallic, and out of place. Reaching in, Elias pulled out a coin, warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been after sitting in water. Gold, or something close to it. Its edges were worn smooth, but strange markings cut across its face symbols that looked like letters but belonged to no language he knew. The piece was heavier than gold ought to be, denser, unnatural. His gaze dropped back into Widow's Well. If one coin was there, surely more could be hiding below. Maybe that explained why this ranch had gone silent so suddenly. Why Ryland Pierce had vanished without a trace. Why townsfolk muttered and crossed themselves whenever the place was mentioned. Elias tucked the coin into his shirt pocket, feeling its weight press against his chest. The cool metal touched his skin through the thin fabric, yet a heat spread from it, almost alive. Just 3 months earlier, debt collectors had stripped him of his own farm. His wife had taken their children east to her people. This lonely ranch was his last chance to prove he wasn't finished, wasn't the failure everyone believed. He was lowering the bucket again when a voice broke the silence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Elias turned sharply. A woman rode up, dismounting with practiced grace. She was near 40, steel-gray hair drawn tight, her eyes sharp and knowing. She wore a riding dress plain but fine, meant for someone with money who didn't mind work. "Ada Whitlow," she said. "I own Eastgate Farm, just across the ridge. Been watching you since you arrived. Elias Carter. Isn't it?" He kept one hand close to his pocket. feeling the warmth of the coin under the cloth, just trying to draw some water. A man's got to drink. Ada stepped closer, gaze fixed on the darkness of the well. That hole's been nothing but trouble since the first stone was laid. Ryland Pierce learned that lesson the hard way. What happened to him, Elias asked. No one knows for certain. One day he was talking big about striking it rich. The next, gone, vanished, left everything closed still hanging inside the house, food on the table, horse standing in the corral. The coin pulsed against Elias's chest in rhythm with his heart. Maybe he just decided to leave. Folks do that. Ada shook her head. Pierce wasn't the running kind. He'd fight a mountain before walking away. But something changed him in those last weeks, something tied to this well. She pointed into the black shaft, and for a moment Elias thought he heard something stir down below. Not water, but something that made his skin crawl while the coin grew hotter in his pocket. "What sort of trouble are we talking about?" he asked. "The kind that swallows a man whole." Ada whispered. Her boots clicked against the stone rim. Pierce quit coming to town, quit talking to neighbors. When folks did catch sight of him, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Elias shifted uneasily, the coin now burning like a brand. Could have just been hard work wearing him down. Ada's voice dropped lower. "Not this time. My farmhand, Hank Tully, came out to help him mend fence, found him right here at this well, holding conversations with someone who wasn't there, talking as though the darkness itself was speaking back." The sun stretched long shadows across Dry Creek Ranch, but Elias felt a chill all the same. He pulled the rope again, and though it had felt heavy before, now it seemed to drag against something deeper, something unseen. The second time, Elias Carter hauled the bucket up from Widow's Well. The water inside was no longer the clear sparkle he had first seen. Now it carried a strange murk, a darker tint that rippled in the lamplight as though something had disturbed it down below. He frowned, unsettled. Ada Whitlow stood a few steps back, arms folded tightly, watching him with those piercing gray eyes. She spoke low, almost like she was telling him something she shouldn't. "My hand, Hank Tully." Swore Ryland Pierce kept talking about a discovery that would change the world. Said it'd make him richer than any cattle baron between here and the Rio Grande. But when Hank pressed him to explain, Pierce would only smile and whisper that the well was speaking secrets to him. Elias dropped the bucket harder than he meant to. Water sloshed over the sides, running into cracks in the dirt. His jaw set. "Wells don't whisper. Mrs. Whitlow, they hold water, nothing more." "That's what I believe, too," Ada replied, her tone clipped but uneasy. Then, with a quick motion, she reached into her riding coat and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Her fingers worked the knot loose with deliberate care. Inside rested a coin gold, glinting faintly in the waning sunlight, carved with the same strange markings as the one burning against Elias's chest. He sucked in a breath. His heart gave a hard thump as she held the coin out. The weight in his pocket seemed to stir in response. "I found this," Ada said, "in my chicken yard, 3 days after Pierce vanished. My hens quit laying altogether. I went out to see what was wrong, dug down a few inches into the packed earth. This was buried there, 6 inches down. My flock wouldn't go near the corner of the pen after that. Had to move them to a new shed." Elias pulled his coin from his pocket and compared the two. They caught the light identically, as though they were minted at the same moment by the same hand. Shadows bent oddly around the markings, which seemed to squirm and shift when he wasn't staring directly at them. "There are more," Elias murmured. Ada looked at him sharply. "More what coins?" he said. "Down there. I can feel it." Her face paled as she quickly rewrapped her coin and tucked it deep into her coat. "That's exactly what Ryland Pierce said to me the day before he was gone. Word for word. He swore there was a fortune waiting at the bottom of that well." Something in her tone carried more than simple worry. Elias narrowed his eyes. "What aren't you telling me?" Ada hesitated, then spoke slowly, as though each word was weighted. Pierce wasn't the first man to disappear here. Before him there was Nathan Crow. That was 15 years back. He left behind a wife and 2 children who swore he hadn't been himself for weeks. Talked of treasure hidden beneath the ground. Swore the well spoke to him in the night. Elias felt the coin dig heavily into his palm. He couldn't bring himself to drop it. Ada continued. "And before Crow, no one lived here for near 20 years. The locals passed down stories of men who came seeking easy riches. None of them stayed long. Folks say the land itself swallows the greedy whole." Her words trailed off, her gaze fixed past his shoulder. Elias turned and saw fresh horse tracks stamped into the dust behind him. His stomach tightened. They hadn't been there when he and Ada began talking. The tracks circled the well 3 times, then pointed toward the far hills. His throat tightened. Those prints weren't here before. Ada had already mounted her horse, her face drawn tight. "I need to get back to Eastgate Farm. If you've got sense, you'll be gone from Dry Creek Ranch before nightfall. Pack what little you've brought and leave. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved." Her horse kicked up dust as she rode hard toward the horizon, leaving Elias alone beside Widow's Well as the shadows stretched long across the yard. He stood silent for a time, the desert wind whispering through the brittle grass. The coin in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with every breath, pressing against his ribs until it felt like an anchor pulling him toward the black opening of the well. This was his last chance. His farm, back east, was gone. His wife and children were miles away, waiting to see if he'd fail again. He couldn't walk away from a promise of treasure, not when it might be the one thing that could restore his name. Resolute. Elias tied his rope to the stone rim, pulling hard twice to test the knot. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since dawn, but hunger would have to wait. Whatever waited down there might decide his future more than any meal. He slung the bucket aside, looped the rope around his waist, and lowered himself into the darkness. His boots scraped the rough stone walls as he descended. The circle of daylight above grew smaller, shrinking to the size of a coin itself, until the cool, damp air swallowed him whole. When his feet hit solid ground, he realized there was no water waiting. The bottom was layered with loose dirt and scattered debris, as if someone had dug furiously and then abandoned the work. He struck a match. The brief flare lit jagged scratches in the stone walls. Tool marks. Someone had chiseled at this place deliberately. The match burned low, nipping his fingers. He cursed, lit another. That's when he saw them. Coins. Dozens of them. Maybe 30 pieces scattered across the dirt, each catching the flame's glow with the same strange shimmer as the ones he and Ada carried. They weren't spread at random. They had been arranged in a crude circle around a mound in the center of the chamber. Heart hammering. Elias dropped to his knees and clawed at the soil. His fingers struck wood. He scraped faster until he unearthed a small box, about the size of a worn Bible, heavy enough to strain his arms. He shoved it inside his jacket, then snatched up as many coins as his pockets could hold. The weight dragged at him, making his pants sag, but he didn't care. Riches were pouring into his hands faster than he could count. The matches burned away one by one as he stuffed the last coins into his coat. He struck his final match and froze. On the stone wall, hidden in the shadows, words had been carved with rough strokes. They're watching. They know what I found. If I don't make it, search the old church ruins. Look for the stone marked with an X. R. Elias's breath came sharp. Ryland Pierce. The match guttered and died. Panic surged in his chest. He grabbed the rope and scrambled upward, climbing faster than he had ever climbed before. The coins clanked heavily against him with each desperate movement. His lungs burned. His arms ached. But he pulled until he heaved himself back over the rim. Darkness had already swallowed Dry Creek Ranch. The stars burned cold above him, but the constellations seemed oddly twisted, not where they belonged. A shiver traced his spine. He lit his oil lamp with shaking hands and pulled the wooden box from his coat. The hinges groaned, but they still held. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a letter written in a trembling hand. My name is Ryland Pierce. If you're reading this, I am likely dead. The coins in Widow's Well are no gift. They are bait. Someone has been placing them here for years, drawing in anyone desperate or foolish enough to dig. They have been watching me, waiting. I discovered the truth too late. Seek the old church foundation, half a mile north. Find the stone with the X. What is hidden there will explain everything, but beware. They will know the moment you touch these coins. They are probably watching you already. Elias folded the letter and stuffed it back into the box. His skin prickled. From the brush beyond the lamplight came the soft crack of a branch, then another. He killed the flame instantly, crouching low. The coins jingled faintly in his pockets despite his efforts to stay silent. Footsteps. Several sets. Careful, deliberate. Not the shuffle of drifters, but the steady advance of men who knew exactly what they were hunting. The well loomed behind him, the ranch house a dark silhouette 30 yards ahead. His horse, Bramble, was tied near the old corral. If he could slip through the shadows without being seen, he might yet ride north to St. Bridget's ruins, the place Pierce had marked as holding the real treasure. But the footsteps were drawing closer, and the night around Dry Creek Ranch was no longer empty. Elias Carter crouched beside Widow's Well, the desert wind tugging at his sleeves. He lit his oil lamp, the yellow flame chasing back the dark, just enough to study the wooden box he had pulled from the dirt below. The wood was cracked, weather-stained from years of damp, but the iron hinges still worked. With a sharp breath, he pried it open. Inside lay a sheet of paper wrapped in oiled cloth. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. To whoever finds this, it began. My name is Ryland Pierce. If these words have reached you, I am likely gone. The coins in Widow's Well are not treasure, they are bait. Elias's jaw clenched. He read on, every muscle taut. Someone has been using these coins to lure men here for decades. I realized it too late. They watched me for weeks, waiting until I grew careless. The gold is not the prize, it is the hook. The real treasure is knowledge. Knowledge certain men will kill to keep buried. Elias's pulse hammered. He turned the page. Seek St. Bridget's ruins, north of here. Beneath the foundation lies a loose stone, marked with an X. There you will find the truth. But beware, the moment you touch these coins, they will know. They are likely watching you even now." A chill rippled across Elias's shoulders. The words blurred for a moment as he heard the sharp crack of a branch outside the lamplight. Then another. His blood turned cold. He stuffed the letter back into the box, snapped the lid shut, and blew out the lamp. Darkness swallowed the ranch yard. Elias crouched low, straining to listen. Footsteps, several sets, moving carefully through the scrub. They thought they were quiet, but the desert night betrayed them. The warning in Ryland Pierce's letter echoed in his mind. They were watching. And now they were closing in. Elias moved away from the well, slow and deliberate. The coins weighed heavy in his pockets, clinking faintly no matter how carefully he stepped. Ahead loomed the abandoned ranch house, its roof line cutting a black shape against the starlit sky. If he could slip inside unseen, he might be able to circle through the back and reach his horse. Bramble tethered near Twin Post Corral. From there he could ride north toward St. Bridget's ruins and the truth Pierce had promised. But the steps were coming faster now. At least 3 men. They spread across the yard, moving with precision. These weren't vagrants looking for shelter. They were organized, practiced, and they had a purpose. Elias crept up the porch steps, testing each board before putting his weight down. The front door sagged open on rusted hinges. Inside, dust blanketed everything. A coffee cup sat on the table. Brown rings dried into the porcelain. A shirt hung limp from a peg. Boots stood by the bed. Ryland Pierce's life was still here, untouched, as though he had stepped outside and never returned. Elias felt the pull of curiosity but forced himself onward. Through a broken window, he saw silhouettes moving near the outbuildings. One carried a lantern low, shielding its glow. Another had the long shadow of a rifle across his back. Bramble stood tied behind the house, ears flicking nervously in the night. Elias eased toward the back door, careful not to creak the warped floorboards. He reached his mare, her warm breath clouding in the cool air. She gave a soft nicker when she saw him. He stroked her neck, whispering, "Easy, girl. Quiet now." He loosened the reins, placed his boot in the stirrup. "That's far enough, friend." The voice came from the darkness behind him. Calm, steady, yet sharp with authority. The kind of tone a man used when a gun was leveled on his target. Elias froze, his boot still in the stirrup. "Turn around. Slow. Keep your hands where I can see them." Elias did as he was told. 3 figures emerged from the shadows. The one in the middle was tall and lean, dressed in a long black coat that brushed the dirt. Even in the faint starlight, his presence radiated command. The men flanking him held rifles, barrels trained on Elias. The tall man stepped forward, his voice smooth. "Name's Silas Hart. I represent certain interests in this territory, interests that happen to care very much about this property. I'm just passing through," Elias said, forcing calm into his tone. "Stopped for water and shelter." Silas smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "We both know that's not true." The man on the left, his face crisscrossed with scars, shifted closer, lantern in hand, his cold eyes locked on Elias. "Check his pockets. Silas, bet he's got what we came for." The coins in Elias's coat and trousers seemed to grow heavier, dragging him down like lead weights. His heart pounded. They already knew. They had been watching since he touched the well. The coins aren't what you're after." "Are they?" Elias asked, recalling the letter's warning. His voice came out harder than he intended. "They're bait, that's all." Silas's grin widened. "Smart man. Smarter than Ryland Pierce ever was. He figured it out, too. Eventually. Trouble was, by then it didn't do him a lick of good." "What happened to him?" Elias demanded. "The same thing that's about to happen to you," Silas said evenly. "If you don't cooperate, there are secrets buried in this territory, secrets certain men prefer to leave untouched. Pierce forgot that. Looks like you have too." Elias's mouth went dry. He fought to keep his eyes steady, though fear clawed at his insides. The two gunmen stepped closer, rifles ready. He tried to stall. "If you already know the truth, why let the coins sit in that well? Why let more men come? Because it's easier this way." Silas answered simply. "Desperate men chase gold. They dig their own graves while we watch from the dark. The scarred man, Boone Mercer," Elias recalled hearing his name whispered once, in town, gave a low laugh. "And you've dug deeper than most." Elias shifted slightly, his hand brushing Bramble's reins. "You don't want me. You want what Pierce left behind." Silas's eyes narrowed. "And what makes you think Pierce left anything at all?" "Because I've seen his letter," Elias said, before he could stop himself. "I know about St. Bridget's ruins." The air seemed to tighten. Silas's expression didn't change, but the rifles lifted higher, barrels glinting faintly in the starlight. For a long, dangerous moment, no one spoke. Then Silas said softly, "That was a mistake, friend. Now you know too much." Elias's heart thudded like a drum. He knew one thing for certain if he didn't act quickly. He would never see the dawn, never reach the old church foundation, never learn the truth Pierce had died trying to reveal. Secrets. That was what this was really about. Secrets worth far more than the coins glittering in Widow's Well. Elias Carter stood motionless beside his horse, Bramble, while the scar-faced gunman leveled his rifle higher. "Why not end it now?" Silas, the man, growled, voice flat and cold. "Be easier than jawing all night." But Silas Hart lifted his hand in command. "Not yet. Our guest may have more use to us alive. He seems quick on the uptake. I'd rather see if he's smart enough to recognize his position." Elias's mind raced. Ryland Pierce's letter had spoken of St. Bridget's ruins, but, judging by their words, these men didn't know that part of the message. If Elias could stall, if he could find some way to break free, he might yet reach the church ruins and uncover whatever truth Pierce had risked everything to protect. "What kind of cooperation are we talking about?" Elias asked carefully. Silas reached into his coat. From inside he drew a folded paper, its edges crisp despite the desert air, even by lantern glow. Elias recognized the kind of document. It was legal, stamped, and sealed with authority. "Just a matter of signatures," Silas said smoothly. "This here says you willingly sign over any claim you have to this property. You walk away, forget the well, forget the coins, forget everything. You never set foot here again. Do that, and we all part ways civil." Elias narrowed his eyes, trying to make out the words. The script was dense with legal phrasing, but enough was clear to make his gut twist. It was a transfer of property rights, dressed up to look official. Someone wanted Dry Creek Ranch under their name, and they were willing to threaten or kill anyone who got in the way. He forced a frown. "Don't understand why you need me. If you want this ranch, why not buy it outright? pay whoever still owns it." That brought a dry chuckle from Silas, without a shred of humor, if only it were that simple. When Ryland Pierce vanished, he left a trail of debts thicker than cattle in spring. Some of the folks he owed don't forgive easy. This ranch is collateral. Trouble is, ownership gets sticky when the man disappears without proof of death. Lawyers, judges, creditors, it's a mess. But if someone were to sign with clean hands, the scarred man, Boone Mercer, stepped closer, his rifle steady. "We're wasting time. Silas, let's finish this. Patience." Silas answered, his voice calm but firm. "Our friend here's going to see reason." His eyes locked on Elias. A new settler claiming this spread would look legal enough. Sign the deed, then sign the transfer. 2 strokes of the pen and this matter disappears. Elias's chest tightened. The coins weighed against him, cold reminders of Pierce's warning. These men knew of the gold, but not the message. That gave him the only advantage he had left. He tried to steady his voice. "What makes you think I have any claim to this place territorial law?" Silas replied. "Any citizen can stake an abandoned property if he works it for 30 days and files the paperwork. You've been here, 3 days? Close enough for our purpose. Paper can make it 30. He reached into another pocket and produced a second sheet. "Sworn statement says you've been working this ranch over a month. Signed by witnesses, notarized, the whole deal. Only thing missing is your name. And if I don't sign," Elias asked quietly. The third man, who had stood silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was gravel grinding in a bucket. "Then you disappear. Same as Pierce, same as Nathan Crow before him. Leave your boots by the bed, a shirt on the peg, food on the table, and no one ever hears from you again." Elias's hand twitched toward his jacket, where Pierce's letter lay hidden. He stopped himself just in time. His throat tightened. "So it was you. You killed them." Silas's smile never faltered. "We prefer to say we solved a problem. Pierce and Crow both made the same mistake. They thought those coins were theirs to hoard. But the moment they began asking questions where they came from, who placed them, why they became liabilities. Liabilities don't live long out here. What questions exactly Elias pressed, hoping to buy a few more seconds. Silas and Boone exchanged glances. Questions about shipments, about arrangements, about things better left in the dark. Boone grunted, shifting impatiently. "Enough talk. He's seen too much." "Maybe," Silas admitted, "but perhaps he still has a use." His gaze hardened. "You see, Carter, those coins aren't random trinkets. They're payment. Each one represents a service rendered. Men risk a great deal for those coins, and they're compensated for their silence." The truth began to piece itself together in Elias's mind. The coins weren't treasure at all. They were wages, evidence of dealings meant to stay buried. Ryland Pierce and Nathan Crow had stumbled onto something illegal, and it had cost them their lives. What kind of services, Elias asked. Silas's smile returned, but colder now. The kind that involves moving goods across the territorial line without customs sniffing around. The kind that lines pockets with silver and keeps certain men fat and happy. But only if no one shines a lantern where it doesn't belong. The word struck Elias like a hammer smuggling. It explained the isolated location, the vanishings, the strange gold used as bribes or wages. This ranch wasn't just abandoned, it was a hub. Without thinking, Elias muttered, "The church ruins." The instant the words left his lips, his gut clenched. Silas's smile vanished. his eyes sharpening like drawn steel. "What did you say?" Elias froze. Pierce's letter had mentioned St. Bridget's ruins, but these men hadn't known. Now he had tipped his hand. Boone snapped his rifle to his shoulder. "He knows about the drop site." "Hold," Silas barked, though his gaze was hard as stone. He stepped closer. "Where did you hear about the church foundation?" Elias's mind raced. If they knew he had Pierce's letter, his life was worth less than dust. He forced his voice steady. "Heard talk in Silver Vista. Folks mentioned an old foundation somewhere north. Figured it might make a good landmark to navigate by." Silas studied him for a long, suffocating moment. The desert wind hissed between them. Finally, Silas's mouth twitched in something almost like amusement. "Maybe, or maybe you're lying. Either way, I think you just proved yourself valuable." Elias swallowed hard. He had bought himself a sliver of time, but at the cost of placing a noose around his own neck. What people? What exactly did they say? Silas Hart's voice was as sharp as a knife. Elias Carter forced a shrug, trying to sound casual. Just general talk. Someone mentioned ruins from an old settlement. Said the ground out there's unstable. Told me to stay away. The third man, gravel-voiced and broad-shouldered, stepped closer. Boone Mercer's eyes narrowed beneath his hat brim. "He's lying. Silas. Nobody in town knows about that place but us and our circle." Silas's hand drifted toward the revolver at his hip. "I think you're right. Caleb," he said, using the man's given name, "which means our friend here's done more exploring than he admits. Strip him down. Search him proper." Boone took a step forward, rifle angled, when a sharp whinny carried across the ranch. All four men froze. From the direction of the main road came the unmistakable rhythm of hooves. Someone was riding in at night. "Someone's coming," Boone whispered. Silas cursed under his breath. "Get him inside. If this is one of our contacts showing early, they can't see him." Caleb seized Elias's arm, jamming the rifle barrel against his back. "Move. Try anything clever, and you'll eat lead." They hustled him up the creaking porch steps. The boards groaned beneath their boots as the distant rider slowed near the yard. Elias caught a glimpse in the moonlight, a lone figure in a long coat, hat pulled low, dismounting 20 yards off. "You're early," Silas called, stepping into the lantern glow with practiced ease. His hand hovered near his gun, but never quite touched it. The rider's voice carried smoothly, refined, educated, too polished for a smuggler. "Had to change the schedule. Federal marshals are sniffing around the border. Safer to move now than wait until tomorrow." Elias's gut tightened. Whoever this was, they weren't some drifter. This was someone with money and pull. "Do you have the merchandise?" Silas asked. "In the wagon. A mile back." The rider's voice was clipped, businesslike, but security concerns me. Too many questions being asked lately. Silas cast a glance toward the ranch house. "We've had a complication. Another drifter found the well. Handle it like the others." The rider replied coldly, "Loose ends are unacceptable. Not with this much at stake." "Of course," Silas said smoothly, "but first we need to know how much he's learned." He mentioned the church ruins. At that, the rider stiffened. Even across the darkness, Elias could sense the change. "That's impossible," the man said sharply. "Only 3 people know that location and 2 stand before me." "Then we've got a problem," Silas muttered. "Because our guest does know?" The rider remounted in one smooth motion. "Bring the wagon up. Question him, get every scrap of information, then dispose of him as planned. Make it look like he slipped into Widow's well. As for his horse, sell it across the border. His tone grew colder still. And Silas, see that this is the last mess I have to clean. Prophets like this can't risk exposure. With that, he dug in his spurs and vanished back toward the road. Caleb shoved Elias hard through the ranch house door. The stale air smelled of dust and abandonment, pierced faintly by old coffee grounds. Sit, Caleb ordered, nodding to a wooden chair near the table. Keep quiet. Silas will want words with you before dawn. Elias dropped into the chair. The coins in his pockets clinked faintly against the wood. Through the cracked window, he saw Silas and Boone talking low near the well. Their silhouettes shifted as they planned what came next. He had minutes, maybe less, before they came inside. Once they found Pierce's letter tucked in his coat. His fate was sealed. He scanned the room. The cabin hadn't changed since Pierce disappeared. A shirt still hung on its peg by the door. Boots lined beside the bed as if their owner would return. Everything was still, frozen in time. But Elias knew Pierce hadn't just left warnings, he'd left options. The ranch house had 2 doors, front and back, both watched. The windows were small, set high in the wall, impossible to squeeze through quickly. Escape looked hopeless. Still, Elias's eyes lingered on the floorboards near the back wall. They looked different, newer, less worn by time. Why had Pierce replaced them? Could he have hidden something there? Caleb leaned near the front window, keeping his rifle angled as he watched Silas and Boone outside. For the moment, his attention was divided. Elias's pulse quickened. If there was a hidden hatch under those boards, it might be his only chance. Then came the low rattle of wagon wheels from the road. Caleb straightened instantly, peering out through the broken glass. "Silas," he called. "Boss is bringing the wagon." Outside, Silas's voice answered, clear in the still night air. "Good. Get our guest ready. Time to learn what he knows." Bootsteps crunched in the dirt. In moments, they'd be at the door. Elias's window for action was closing fast. He shifted subtly in his chair, testing how much noise the legs made on the floor. The scrape was faint, masked by wagon wheels and horses outside. His thoughts tumbled fast. If Pierce had carved a way out under the floorboards, Elias had seconds to find it. If he guessed wrong, if the boards were solid, he'd be caught halfway to nowhere and shot on the spot. He glanced at Caleb. The man still watched the window, muttering about the wagon. For one fragile breath, Elias wasn't under his full eye. He flexed his legs, preparing. Voices grew louder outside. Silas and Boone were crossing the yard, boots crunching closer, lantern light glowing against the porch posts. Elias forced calm into his movements, leaning back as though resigned, then suddenly dropping his boot heel against the edge of the floor near the back wall. The board gave with a faint creak loose. His pulse thundered. He pressed harder. The plank shifted enough to reveal darkness beneath. An old root cellar, maybe. Pierce had been clever after all. The front door latch rattled. Silas's hand was on it. Elias had one chance, while Caleb Yates still had his attention fixed on the wagon arriving outside. Elias Carter slid from the chair as quietly as he could. The floor complained beneath his boots, but the sound blended with the grind of wheels and horses snorting in the yard. He crouched near the back wall, fingers brushing the uneven planks. Some boards looked newer than the rest, as if replaced in haste. His hand found one that wasn't fastened down. Carefully, he lifted it, revealing a shallow cavity. Inside rested a leather satchel wrapped in oilcloth and, beside it, a small iron crowbar, left there by Ryland Pierce himself. The hinges of the front door squealed. Silas Hart and Boone Mercer stepped into the gloom. Elias snatched the satchel and the crowbar, lowering the board back into place just as Caleb turned. "Where do you think you're going?" Caleb's rifle swung toward him. Instead of answering, Elias hurled the crowbar through the nearest window. Glass shattered, scattering shards into the night. He dove headfirst through the opening, the jagged edges ripping his shirt and drawing hot lines across his skin. He struck the dirt hard, rolled to keep from breaking a bone, and clutched the satchel tight to his chest. Shouts erupted inside. "Stop him!" Elias sprinted toward the corral. Bullets cracked in the air, whining past his ears, kicking up dust at his heels. Adrenaline drowned out pain. He reached Bramble, his mare, still tied where he'd left her. With one fluid motion, he vaulted into the saddle, tugged the reins free, and dug his boots into her flanks. Behind him, Silas's voice bellowed, "Find him!" He can't get far, but Elias was already flying north, Bramble's hooves drumming against the hard-pan earth. He followed the direction Pierce's letter had described. The desert opened before him, silvered by moonlight. Mesas and sagebrush threw long, deceptive shadows. Every twisted rock looked like an ambush. Yet Elias had spent his life under open skies. The North Star was his compass. He kept Bramble angled true until the outline of ruined walls rose from a shallow valley. There it was. St. Bridget's ruins. The remains of the old church sprawled across the hollow, its stone foundation forming a rectangle, with the stump of a bell tower leaning at one corner. Time and weather had gnawed the structure nearly to nothing, but Elias's pulse quickened. Pierce's letter had promised answers here. He dismounted, leading Bramble softly among the stones. The satchel thumped against his ribs with each step. Pierce's words echoed in his head. Look for the loose stone marked with an X. He searched the north wall, his hands trailing across rough stone. Every block bore scars from wind and sand. But then, there it was, a sharp, deliberate X, carved deep. He pressed. The stone shifted, with Pierce's crowbar. Elias pried it loose, muscles straining until the block tumbled free. Behind it lay a hollow space. Inside was a metal chest, heavier and larger than the one from Widow's Well. He braced his legs and hauled it out. The box nearly pulled him over, its weight staggering. Hoofbeats thundered across the ridge above. Elias's head jerked up. Silas, Boone, and Caleb had followed his trail, their horses silhouetted against the stars. Heart pounding. Elias flipped the latches and cracked the chest open. Inside lay neat bundles of papers, ledgers, sealed envelopes, and letters bound with twine. He rifled quickly, scanning in the moonlight. What he saw chilled him more than the night air. These weren't mere accounts of smuggling. They were records of corruption threaded through the territory like rot in a beam. Stolen army rifles, contraband whiskey and opium, bribes paid to customs agents at Silver Vista's border crossing, payments authorized by a federal judge himself. Names leapt from the pages: Judge Morrison, Customs Agent Williams, several territorial officials Elias recognized. These weren't rough smugglers scraping by. This was a machine powered by men in power, men willing to kill to stay hidden. The riders reached the rim of the valley. Lantern light flared behind them, casting their figures into stark outlines. Elias rose to his feet, the heavy box cradled in his arms. "That's far enough," he called, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "I know what you've been hiding, and I've got the proof in my hands." Silas guided his horse down the slope, pistol drawn, his coat fluttering with each stride. Boone and Caleb flanked him, rifles ready, handed over. Silas said coolly, "Do that, and maybe we'll let you breathe a while longer." Elias pulled a document from the chest, holding it high. "This letter is signed by Judge Morrison himself, authorizing stolen rifles to be paid for in gold." And here he flipped to a ledger page proof of payments to Williams for ignoring illegal shipments. "You're not just running contraband. You're part of a conspiracy that climbs straight into government offices." Boone raised his rifle, but Silas lifted a hand. "Hold. He's right about one thing. Those papers could ruin us, if they reach the wrong hands. But papers are worthless without someone alive to swear by them. Dead men don't testify." Elias steadied his breathing. "True, but I'm not the only one who knows now." He reached into the satchel, pulling several folded sheets Pierce had left behind. Pierce already sent copies to allies you don't even know exist. It was a bluff, but he delivered it with conviction. Silas's jaw tightened. His horse stamped nervously on the slope. Caleb muttered, "He's bluffing. Nobody but us and Pierce knew. Pierce was smarter than you give him credit for." Elias said, "Smarter than Delaney, too." He knew he was marked, so he left trails. The men hesitated. Boone's knuckles whitened on his rifle stock. Caleb glanced uneasily at Silas. The weight of uncertainty pressed on them. Elias seized the moment. "You kill me, and maybe you silence one voice, but when those papers reach the right ears, you'll have federal marshals swarming this place like hornets. Maybe even the army itself. Is that a risk you want to take?" Silas studied him, lantern glow catching the sharp angles of his face. His pistol never wavered. "You're bold, Carter. I'll grant you that. But boldness doesn't always mean wisdom. If Pierce truly left copies, why hasn't anyone come yet? Why are you alone, standing in the dust with nothing but paper and a horse?" Elias forced a smile. "Because Pierce knew timing was everything, and maybe, just maybe, the time has come." The three men shifted uneasily, suspicion gnawing at them. Above, on the ridge, the wind picked up, carrying the faintest echo of distant hooves. Elias's ears caught at first riders, more than one, coming from the north. Whether they were allies or strangers, he couldn't tell. But the sound alone was enough to deepen the doubt in his enemies' minds. Silas turned his head sharply toward the sound. Boone muttered a curse. Caleb licked his lips. Elias tightened his grip on the chest. He had no intention of surrendering the evidence. If he could buy a few more breaths, perhaps fate or those distant riders might tip the balance in his favor. "Before I came out here," Elias Carter said, holding his voice steady, "I made copies of Ryland Pierce's letter and sent them to 3 different newspapers across 3 territories. If I don't show by morning, those editors will get full instructions on where to find the rest." It was a bluff, nothing more than a desperate gamble, but Silas Hart had no way of knowing that. In the moonlight, Elias watched doubt flicker across the man's face. For the first time, Silas looked less like a ruthless enforcer and more like someone caught between 2 bad choices. "You're bluffing," Silas said, but his words lacked conviction. "Maybe," Elias replied evenly, "but are you willing to bet your life on it? Once those reporters start asking questions, how long before they tie you to the missing ranchers? How long before Judge Morrison and Agent Williams are dragged into the open? Caleb Yates spurred his horse forward, his voice rough as gravel. Silas, we can't let him walk. He's holding the whole operation in his hands, but Silas surprised them both. He holstered his pistol slowly, his eyes never leaving Elias. No, the risk is too high. If he's telling the truth, killing him will only guarantee our downfall. Boone Mercer swore under his breath. So what then? We disappear, Silas said flatly. Tonight, burn everything at Dry Creek Ranch. Scatter. Head in different directions. The boss can cut his losses. This operation is finished. The wagon Boone pressed. Forget the wagon. Silas snapped. It's over. For a heartbeat, silence filled the valley. Then the three men wheeled their horses and rode into the night, their silhouettes swallowed by the desert horizon. Elias stood rooted to the spot, clutching the iron chest to his chest until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did he breathe, his lungs aching from holding so much fear. He looked down at the papers once more, the proof of everything Pierce had died to uncover, and swore silently that no one would ever bury the truth again. 3 months later, the world was very different. Elias Carter stood tall inside the federal courthouse at the Capitol. The chamber smelled of ink, tobacco, and sweat, filled to bursting with newspapermen, lawyers, and curious townsfolk eager for justice. Shackles clinked as Judge Morrison was marched past the benches, his once proud face pale with shame. The ledgers from St. Bridget's ruins, combined with Pierce's letters, had given federal marshals everything they needed. 12 men had been arrested, 2 territorial officials, 3 customs agents, and a host of smugglers who once thought themselves untouchable. The newspapers blazed with headlines about corruption at the highest levels. Families of missing ranchers finally received the truth. Fletcher Silas Hart and his partners had vanished, but their empire was ashes. No wagon, no coins, no shadow dealings across the border. The court recognized Elias not as a trespasser, but as the rightful claimant to Dry Creek Ranch, with federal reward money in hand. He sent word east. Within weeks, his wife and children returned, stepping off the train with tears and laughter. Together, they rebuilt Dry Creek into something thriving. What had been a haunted ruin became a working spread with cattle in the pastures and fields of barley waving in the breeze. Neighbors who once avoided the land now rode over for supper, shaking Elias's hand, calling him not cursed but courageous. The government issued declarations of death for Ryland Pierce and Nathan Crow, clearing their names of suspicion. Their widows and children received compensation from the territorial treasury, enough to keep them from poverty. At last, the men were remembered not as deserters but as victims of a cruel conspiracy. And Elias he found peace. On quiet evenings, after the cattle were bedded down and his children laughed inside the lamplight glow of their new home, he would walk out to Widow's Well. The air smelled of sage and dust. The stones of the well glistened faintly in the moonlight. The same place where his life had changed forever. The water within remained clear and cold, but the gold coins were long gone, turned over as evidence to the marshals. Stripped of their false promise, the coins were nothing but metal. The real treasure had been truth, justice, and the chance for Elias Carter to build a life not on desperation, but on dignity. He'd come to Dry Creek Ranch a broken man, a failed farmer who had lost everything. What he found in the darkness wasn't fortune. It was the strength to face fear expose corruption, and start again, and for that, he would always be grateful. Elias Carter's story is more than a tale of hidden coins and desert mysteries. It's a reminder of how easily the promise of wealth can blind us, and how true value often lies elsewhere. The gold in Widow's Well drew men into its shadow, but what destroyed them wasn't greed alone. It was silence, corruption, and fear of the truth. Elias survived because he chose courage over comfort, justice over secrecy. For those of us who've lived long enough to see hardship, this lesson rings familiar. We've all faced moments when temptation whispered an easy way out, or when speaking up carried risk. Yet it is in those moments that character is forged. Integrity, once tested, becomes the legacy we leave behind. At 60 or 70, perhaps we no longer chase fortunes, but we know the worth of clear water, honest work, and family gathered around a table. Elias's greatest treasure wasn't the gold he turned in, it was the chance to rebuild his life with dignity, to hold his children close, and to walk his land free of shame. That's a lesson any generation can carry forward. The richest reward comes not from what we take, but from what we stand for. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep bringing you powerful tales of resilience, justice, and hope. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these stories alive.